Are we alone in the universe? Let's look at this through a biblical perspective, which as far as I'm concerned is the only one that really matters. Pastor Douglas Wilson is here. It's an honor to talk to you, Pastor. How are you, sir?
Great. Good to be with you.
Why do we say, oh, these are aliens and not something of a more spiritual, like saying these are angels or demons?
Well, the reason we talk that way is because of modernist cosmology. We have been trained to think in certain categories. And if the same phenomena that people are talking about now with UFOs and that sort of thing were to appear in 1300 during the medieval period, they would have a different cosmology, a different metric, a different system of categorization that they would put all the phenomena in. And they would call them by different names. So when people ask me if I believe in aliens, do I believe that there are extraterrestrial life forms out there? I would say, sure. There's angels and there's archangels and there's thrones and dominions and principalities and powers. Colossians 1 talks about them, and we've got a number of, I forgot the cherubim and the seraphim. There are all sorts of extraterrestrials, all sorts of beings that are not human beings that are out there in the created order. But when I speak that way, I'm speaking with a biblical vocabulary, with a biblical cosmology. Modernists, schooled by Star Trek and Star Wars and countless science fiction books, have a different, they think in terms of little green men from Mars and aliens in spaceships. I think if someone says this weird thing appeared in the sky above us, they think of spaceships. I think of what it says in Ephesians 2, where the devil is the prince of the power of the air.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, well, I am totally, because I've only been a Christian for like 11 years now. So my cosmology, and I want to ask you to define that word in a moment, is entirely based off of E.T., and that's it. That's it. So I start with that vocabulary and then fill in the blanks after. Gosh, that's so interesting.
Right.
What is cosmology? Is that a religious term? Is that like a theological concept or no?
No, it's simply your framework for understanding the cosmos. What do you think the world around us actually is? So a modern physicist will look at the night sky and he sees the debris field from the Big Bang. That's what he sees. Now, he sees exactly the same he has the same physical sensations that a medieval theologian in 1300 would see looking at the night sky. They're both looking at the same blinking lights in the sky or steady lights in the sky. They're both looking at the same thing, but they have different frameworks for processing it. That framework is your cosmology. So here's an illustration from a related another field. But if we had never seen a crocodile or an alligator, if we'd never seen one of those, and then a paleontologist or a person who studies fossils came across the fossilized remains of a 28-foot crocodile, he would say, "Oh, a dinosaur." He has a certain narrative that he puts this in, and a modern someone who knows about crocodiles would say, "Oh, a crocodile." He has a more contemporary framework. So everything rides on what assumptions you bring to what you see. So the framework of assumptions that you bring to what you see in the physical world, that would be your cosmology. And secular physicists have a cosmology. Christians have a cosmology. The trouble starts when Christians try to fit biblical vocabulary into a secular cosmology. That's kind of a mismatch. That's like trying to play checkers on a backgammon board.
Or is the problem when you take a secular cosmology and fit it into a biblical framework, which is more problematic?
Correct. Yes, that's also bad, and that's how you get things like theistic evolution. You've got the secular framework, and then you bring in God to make it go or to make it work. That's a form of theological syncretism, where you're trying to combine two worldviews that are fundamentally alien to one another.
Okay, so let me ask this one first. How does evolution fit into this?
Well, evolution is simply part of the secular cosmology, right? So when people talk about aliens, they'll talk about a race of beings that is more advanced than ours. What's the hidden assumption in that? Well, they climbed up from the primordial goo of their planet, just like we climbed up from the primordial goo of our planet, and we are not as far along. We don't have really fast flying saucers, and they do. So we think in terms of the technology accounts for the manifestations that we see, but we have the same overriding evolutionary set of assumptions when we're trying to account for their presence here. We account for it the same way we account for our presence here. We think that we just happened.
Yep, that's right. They're just millions of more years ahead of us. So, all right.
Yeah.
So someone's listening, they're like, all right, whatever, you two wacky Christians. That person over there believes in aliens. You call them demons. You're both nuts. None of that stuff exists. What do you say to that?
Well, yeah, basically that's sort of the diehard materialist superstition that says that all the cosmos is matter in motion. And the challenge with that is that there really are too many witnesses, too many repercussions, too many things going on for us to just backhand them and just dismiss them. Now, I believe we have to give an accounting for these phenomena. And I believe that it's much more reasonable to give a spiritual accounting for it than an evolutionary science fiction accounting for it. So, and then you can take the other evidence of the company it keeps. If you went to a convention that was attended by people who are really into UFOs, almost certainly you would also find at that convention vendor booths that were trafficking in occult materials, other paranormal sorts of activities. So the people who've reported on UFOs or claimed to have been abducted or have encounters with them sometimes manifest the same sorts of responses that have traditionally been associated with the occult. Things like automatic writing, for example. So if someone goes into a fit and they start writing, doing automatic writing things that are way beyond their normal abilities, one person would say, see, aliens taught them a bunch of stuff. Aliens uploaded this knowledge into their brain. And a Christian would say, haven't demon-possessed people been doing this sort of thing over the years? Isn't this something that is historically associated with the spiritual realm?
What are demons?
There are two schools of thought within the two main schools of thought. One is that the traditional and more widespread assumption is that the demons are fallen angels, that there was a rebellion against God in heaven, and some of the angels rebelled along with Satan, and Satan took these forces with him, and they became the demonic forces that we deal with here. So angels are demons are fallen angels. And that's the kind of framework you see in Milton's Paradise Lost, where Satan rebels against God and then a bunch of the angels rebel with him and they're cast down. And then now we have to deal with them down here. The other view is that the demons are essentially the ghosts of the Nephilim. And this is an ancient Jewish take also, that the Nephilim were the giants who were destroyed at the time of the flood, and their shades or their ghosts are the demonic forces. And those are the two main accounts that I'm aware of.
What do you ascribe to?
I generally ascribe to the former, the fallen angels, although the late Michael Heiser, in his book called Demons, gives a a robust defense or an articulation of the other view. The view of the ghosts of the Nephilim is not crazy. There are strong arguments in favor of it.
What are ghosts? Are ghosts real? And can people talk to ghosts?
Yeah. So we have a little bit of knowledge scripturally about that. When the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, they cried out in terror because they thought they were seeing a ghost. So that tells us at a bare minimum that the Lord's disciples at the time of Christ believed in ghosts. All right, so because they thought Jesus was one. Jesus assures them, I'm not a ghost. After his resurrection, he assures them that he's not a spirit. See, a spirit doesn't have flesh and bones as you see I have, which is what he says at the end of the Gospel of Luke. Then there's another quirky little appearance when the Apostle Peter is sprung from jail in the book of Acts, and he goes over to John Mark's house where they're having a prayer meeting on his behalf, and he knocks at the door, and a servant girl named Rhoda says, "It's Peter at the gate," and they say, "You're crazy," and they said, "No, it's Peter," and then they say, "Well, it must be his angel," but apparently they had a view of some sort of doppelganger view where there was an angelic connection between a person and his angel, and it's not quite clear what that view was, but the first century disciples clearly believed that there was such a thing as a ghost. Now then, in a more broader systematic theological way, I believe that if you were to ask me if I believed in sort of the classic ghost story where, the pirate who died at this house 200 years ago is still haunting it, no, I don't believe in that kind of haunting. I believe that when it is appointed unto man once to die, and after that the judgment, it says in Hebrews. And then in Proverbs it says, when a wicked man dies, his hope perishes. So I believe that we don't have shades of the deceased hanging around perpetually after death. But when Jesus tells the story of the Lazarus and the rich man, and Lazarus dies, he says that angels accompanied him, took him away. I believe that that's the norm, and so ghosts don't hang around. But I don't know. I can't be dogmatic about how long someone might remain spiritually before the angels gather him up.
I could talk. I didn't think I had hours worth of questions, but I do, Pastor. Unfortunately, we have to go. But maybe this is a good way to end. We got about 30 seconds. Do any differences or discrepancies or disagreements on this affect salvation for a Christian?
No, they don't. I believe that long term, downstream, going back to the point about people trying to combine incompatible cosmologies, that can result in people being troubled in their faith. And when you're troubled in your faith, you then are susceptible to other temptations, and some people apostatize, some people fall away. But we can have good Christians differ over such things and not be anathematizing one another.